Shalom, family. I just wanted to share some brief reflections on the book of Esther. We are in the midst of the celebration of Purim coming up, Purim, and which comes from the book of Esther. And if you haven't read the book of Esther, I definitely recommend reading it. It is not a difficult read. It's about 10 short chapters, and it's not a hard read, and it has so many nuggets in it, so many awesome things. It's interesting. This book is often it's sometimes criticized because the Most High's name doesn't appear in this book, right? But that's really looking on the surface of the matter to say that his name doesn't appear here, because you see the hand of the Most High all throughout this book. The Most High pops up everywhere you look. It's awesome to see. You see his ways, you see his hand just weaved all throughout this story. So it's an amazing book. It's an amazing part of the history of the Hebrew people, and it's the the reason for the celebration of Purim for the Hebrews. So I just want to share some reflections about this book. Uh, just in thinking about how the Most High moved, and how the Most High always moves for us as individuals and for us as a people. He's preparing things ahead of time uh, to be in position later on down the line. So there's things that there's decisions that we make that may be just small minor things. It may not be related to anything at that time. We may not think that it matters or that it's important, but down the line, the Most High will take those things and use those things, and because of that small decision, because of that small moment of integrity, because of those small things, the Most High will be able to move in a way that wouldn't have been possible otherwise, right? The Most High can always move, but he positions us and gives us opportunity to make decisions that make preparations for the future. And I see that reality all throughout this book of Esther, the story of Esther. So I kind of want to focus in on Esther. I want to focus in on Mordecai. And then I want to look a little bit at Haman. All right. So I'll start with Haman. Haman was an interesting character. He's the antagonist in this story, right? So he pops up, and I'm not going to, if you haven't read the book of Esther, please do, because I'm not going to explain too much backdrop here. But for those who have read the story, it'll make sense. But we know that Haman was one of the someone who worked for King Xerxes. This frame with King Xerxes. It starts off with King and his wife, Queen Vashti. That's where the story starts off. And so Haman worked for him. He was one of the princes. And so he's the one who causes the conflict in this story. He is the son of an Agagite. Okay? So he's the son of an Agagite. And he is the one who, once he is promoted, he has an extreme amount of pride. He has a high amount of pride. And so when he gets promoted, he's, concerned about whether people are bowing down to him. And so he's the one that comes into this conflict with Mordecai, and Mordecai, refuses to bow at the king's command, to Haman, and this is where this conflict of the story begins, because, he makes a big deal of it, and he doesn't seek to just destroy Mordecai. He seeks to destroy the whole Israelite people that are scattered in that land. So the Hebrews are scattered throughout the provinces of the Persians and Medes during this time. This is after the Babylonian captivity, and some had returned to Jerusalem, but a lot hadn't, and they were still scattered under these in these provinces under the king in this region. So Haman, who is an antagonist here. So he's a son of an Agagite. So, which takes us back to look at Psalm 83. I believe it's Psalm 83. Let me turn to it. And we look at the fact that there's always a groups of different people who are trying to take down and blot out the Hebrew people. So sometimes when things are happening to you as an individual, it's not just about you as an individual, but it's about a greater picture. And in this situation, it's not just about Mordecai, right? It's not just about Haman and Mordecai. Haman comes from a bloodline of people who are antagonists against the Hebrew people. So I want to read Psalms chapter 83. It says, O Elohim, do not remain silent. Do not be speechless, and do not be still, O El. For look, your enemies make an uproar, and those hating you have lifted up their head. They craftily plot against your people and conspire against your treasured ones. They have said, Come, and let us wipe them out as a nation, and let the name of Yisrael be remembered no more. For they have conspired together with one heart. They have made a covenant against you, the tents of Edom, and the Ishmaelites, Moab, and the Hagarites, Gebal, and Ammon, and Amalek. Okay? So, King Agag was an Amalekite. Okay? So, the Agagites are, uh, the descendants of King Agag, right? So, we know there was a conflict there where the Israelites did not completely destroy uh, King Agag's descendants, the king and his descendants. They didn't obey the instructions, so these people remained amongst them and constantly became a thorn to them. So in this time later, so now where Mordecai is here in this land, and Haman is raising up, and he's a descendant of the Agagites, and now he runs into this thing with Mordecai. Mordecai doesn't want to bow to him, right? Because he's a Israelite, and he's not going to bow to him. So now he doesn't just want to destroy Mordecai. He wants to fulfill what was in Psalm 83. He wants to wipe out the whole people. Okay, so sometimes there's a greater thing that's happening when you're dealing with someone, and it's a spirit in them that is trying to come against not just one person, not just you, not just one individual, but against the whole people. I want to wipe out this whole people because there's a spirit that's in operation in the earth that has conspired to wipe out this whole group of people, right? So we see this working in Haman, and Haman has this tremendous amount of pride. He goes around, talking about all his possessions and his position, and he wants everyone to bow. He's just like, he's really full of himself. And we get to see throughout this story how Haman basically brings the Proverbs to life. I just love the story. And he creates a trap for Mordecai and ends up falling into that trap. And the scriptures tell us that the trap that we set for somebody else is going to be laid up for us. So so the story plays it out well. And I think that was an awesome part of this story. How pride comes before a fall, and his pride came before his fall. It was very apparent in this story. So he plays the role of the antagonist here, and we get to see it in action. We get to see how the Most High will seem that the enemy has a plan set up against you, but the Most High will intervene. Okay, so he intervened and came and Haman's plan was to destroy Mordecai the next morning. It's nighttime. In the morning, he has a plan set up to destroy. He has something made to hang him in the morning, right? And in between that night and the morning, the Most High intervenes in King Xerxes' sleep, okay, to bring something to his remembrance. And what he brings to his remembrance is something, act that Mordecai did, unrelated, just an act that he did that was save the king, but it had been forgotten. So the Most High will interrupt sleep. When the scripture says that the heart of the king is in his hands, he will move the king to do whatever is necessary for his will to be done. So even a king that's not of his kingdom, this is a non-Israelite king. King Xerxes is. So, but the Most High interrupts his sleep in the night. The Most High puts on his remembrance. Okay, we see this in the same story in the book of Daniel. I'm sorry, in the book dealing with Joseph, right? When Joseph has been forgotten in jail, and then the Most High brings it to the cupbearer, brings it to his remembrance what Joseph had did. So the Most High will allow us to do something, do a good deed, do something at some point in time, but we may not see the result of it. We may not see the fruit of it right away. But at a later time, the Most High will bring that to someone's remembrance to show us favor and to put us in position that's necessary right at the right time. Hallelujah. So don't fret when you don't see the results of your labor right then. Sometimes you reap and sow, you reap and you sow in different seasons. Okay, um, so we see that happen, and we see that the Most High does that a lot. So he interferes with the sleep of King Xerxes and brings this to his remembrance. So in the middle of the night, when we say late in the midnight hour, y'all's going to turn it around. We see this in this story. And by the time the morning comes, he's turned the heart of the king to have favor on Mordecai and thwarts the plan of Haman. Okay, so it's amazing how we see the Most High move through the story. I encourage you to read the book if you haven't, but um, I just wanted to touch on that part. So that's Haman. So let's go back to Mordecai and Esther. Okay, Mordecai for me is the backbone of this story. He's the backbone of the book of Esther, of the story of Esther, um, because he started the Most High started this story with Haman a long time ago, because Haman is the cousin. I'm sorry, not Haman. Mordecai. Mordecai is the cousin of Esther. Okay, Esther is an orphan, and Esther's mother and father had passed away, and so as an older cousin, he took her in as a daughter, okay, and raised her, and has been faithful. We see through this story where he's faithful in being a protector of Esther, being a protector, being one who gives guidance. He never falters in that. He continues through that. So in this story, we see that the Most High started with Mordecai being obedient to Torah and making sure that Esther as an orphan was covered. Okay, just in that act of obedience, that act of integrity, and being able to take her in years ago, and keeping her and raising her to this point, and developing a type of relationship where throughout the story, as he's giving her guidance and she's listening, you see that they've developed a relationship that where Esther respects him and listens and accepts his guidance, and that he is willing to step in and give uh, guidance and strong instruction as necessary. So that relationship is important. That relationship, already being in order and being established, created a foundation for this when this situation come up, for them to be able to have the right type of interaction. Right? Can you imagine if they had a bad relationship where they didn't have trust? She couldn't trust if the word that she was getting was coming from Mordecai, or if Mordecai, didn't know if she was going to listen to the words he's saying. And imagine if that relationship was dysfunctional, right? So we have to look at our relationships and know that working on a relationship and having not burning bridges, and having healthy relationships and having integrity and doing the right thing when we're in a position to cover somebody, or that we're walking in Torah and walking in integrity at all times, so that when situations come, it may be 5 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, we never know when the situation is going to come, but we've already laid the foundation, so that the time that it gets there, we're already in order. We're not scrambling. Okay, there's no insecurity there, right? Okay, so Mordecai and Esther, they have this relationship established. Okay, and so when Esther is taken, when King Xerxes when he banishes Vashti, and is looking for another young maiden to come and to take the place as queen. Okay, we we see that Esther, we see that Mordecai gives Esther instructions. It says, do not allow, don't allow it to be known who your people are. When you go in there, Mordecai had the foresight to say, hey, don't let them know what people you are from. Okay, don't let them know your relatives. Okay, and she obeys that. So the Most High allows that to stay hidden until the right time. So as we see that play out through the story, if he wasn't wise in telling her that, and she didn't obey that, then it would have messed up the series of events dealing with Haman, because the king would have known prematurely, and things wouldn't have flowed the way that they flowed. But having obeyed in that sense, and listening to that guidance and giving that guidance, it allowed the events to play out in a way that was perfect. Um, so we continue to see how he, once when she was taken into the king, and Mordecai would be at the king's gate, just checking in to make sure things are going well. And when Mordecai, gave that, when Mordecai gave when he was witness to King Xerxes, his gatekeepers, his doorkeepers, when they were mad with the king and was seeking to lay hands on him, seeking to kill him, uh, Mordecai witnessed that and came and brought that to Esther, and Esther came and brought that to the king, and that's how Mordecai ended up later on in that, when the Most High came to him in the night, he ended up later on gaining that favor with the king because of this situation. So it was important for Mordecai to have acted. The Most High will sometimes put us in situations for us to act in a way that's going to allow us and set us up for the future, right? But it's important to act. Sometimes we waver, we go back and forth, but it's important to act in those situations so that we are in the right position at the right time, right? So another small thing that was important, it said when Esther brought this to the king, Esther spoke to the king in Mordecai's name, right? She didn't speak coming from herself. She gave the credit to Mordecai. That's a small thing, but oftentimes we don't, it's a small thing, but if she didn't speak, if she would have just said, hey, like it was coming from her, or if she would have been vague with it, then Mordecai would not have got the credit, and then that would have made all the difference in this story, in the saving of Mordecai's life, because that act that he did ended up saving his life. But if she wouldn't have presented it coming from Mordecai and giving him the credit, then it would have been all went differently. So just even in those little things of integrity, sometimes we take credit for things that aren't us. We neglect giving people credit or honor or different things when it's due to them. We take things as if it's our own, and we can mess up things in doing that. That's a small thing of integrity. Small thing of integrity, just to make the point that we have to have integrity, and even those small matters can make such a big difference. Hallelujah. So, and I just noticed this throughout the story, those small things, those small moments of integrity that can make all of the difference. So we see how the Most High was setting things up, even going back to Queen Vashti and King Xerxes, and the Most High causing that conspiracy to be going on between them, that controversy, and that, that's the business of a kingdom that is not of Israel, but the Most High allowed that to be mixed up so that Queen Esther can get into the right position, and to be able to bring deliverance later on down the line for the people. But so sometimes we have to pay attention to the conspiracies going on around us, and know that the Most High may be moving things for our good and for our benefit. Hallelujah. All right, so what else do I want to bring out here? I want to bring out the fact that Mordecai and Esther, going back to that relationship and how she was able to pass that information, and then Mordecai later on gets brought closer in. So Mordecai, when he finds out that when he doesn't bow down to Haman, and Haman tries to get the Israelites killed. He tries to destroy the whole people. He goes to the king and asks for this whole group of people to be destroyed because they don't obey the king's command as far as bowing down. And he tries to wipe out these people, telling them that they have their own laws that are different from the king's laws. when and the king, allows this decree to go out, um, um, as this is happening, as this is going on, and Mordecai finds out about this, word gets back to Mordecai, and he tears his robes, his cloth, his garment. He puts on sackcloth and ashes. He's crying out, and he's mourning. So there's a mourning and a weeping and fasting amongst the Yehudim. Once this finds out, so this goes back to Esther, right? And then Esther's trying to figure out what's going on, and sends garments to Mordecai, to figure out what's going on to him. And so Mordecai sends this word back to Esther to let her know what's going on, you know, and gives her instruction to go to the king to make supplication. So what Esther responds, she responds in a way that's kind of like, well, I can only go to the king in certain times, and if I come to him at a time that he hasn't called for me, it might cost me my life. So here we go again with Mordecai and Esther. They're going back in dialogue. So Mordecai brings the word back to Esther to say, and I'm gonna read this verbatim. In chapter 4, verse 13, Mordecai speaks to Esther to say, he speaks strongly to say, it says, and Mordecai commanded them to answer Esther, do not think within yourself to escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Yehudim. For if you keep entirely silent at this time, relief and deliverance shall arise for the Yehudim from another place, while you and your father's house perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Okay, so he gives this strong word to Esther to let her know that, first of all, he makes it known that we see here the faith of Mordecai. We see the faith and the trust in the Most High, and he says that even if basically if Esther and her father's house goes down and perishes, he knows that deliverance and relief is going to come from someplace for the Yehudim. So he knows that the Most High is going to deliver them. So that's why he knows. So you see that he knows the word. He knows and trusts the Most High. He trusts the word. He knows that they're not going to be entirely destroyed as a people. And so his confidence is in the fact that regardless of how it happens, if this ain't the venue, we know that the Most High is going to come through. But what if the Most High put you here in this position for this time, for this very reason? Why? Don't think that you're going to hide and that you're going to escape what's going on right now. He imparts this to her, impresses this on her, right? So he plays a major role in what she does next. Okay, because her first instinct was, hey, if the king don't call me and I come, that might be, my head, so it might lead to my death. So he was able to impress this on her. So we see intercession happening here. Because after this, Esther, replies to Mordecai and says I'll read this part also in verse 16. Go gather all the Yehudim who are present in Shushan and fast for me, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I too and my young women shall fast in the same way. Then I shall go to the king, which is against the law. And if I shall perish, I shall perish. Okay, Mordecai went away and did according to all Esther commanded him. So they're working in this relationship, and you see intercession happening here, right? How do we see intercession? We see the intercession that's happening in the spirit that's going towards the Most High. We see this weeping, this fasting, okay, this prayer going on amongst the people who are sending this up to the Most High, that are interceding in the spirit. But there's a process that connects the spirit in the earth, the spirit and the natural. Okay, so this intercession goes for to cry out to the Most High to move, but then the people have to intercede as well. So Mordecai is acting as an intercessor, to make sure that he's to send this message to impress this upon Esther, to talk to the people. He's acting. And Esther is being an intercessor, okay, because she's getting ready to go to the king and speak to the king, so she's interceding. So there's intercession in the spirit is happening, and intercession is happening with the actions of people. So we have to be mindful of both of those things. Sometimes we'll fast and we'll pray and weep and cry, but we won't actually do anything. We're not in position in hearing what we should do, what wisdom should we use, what steps should we take to go along with it, right? So we see that both of those things are playing a role here. So now Esther goes forward to use wisdom, and I love the wisdom that Esther uses in approaching the king. As she approaches the king, she uses her feminine wisdom. Okay, she exercises great patience. So, just to summarize how she goes first. So she doesn't just go into the king's quarters and say, "Oh, king, I have a request." Right? She gets dressed in her royal attire. She comes in and she prepares a meal for the king, and she uh, has wine prepared for the king and for Haman, and has this feast for him, and wins his favor, gets into his good graces, and then she still does not go for the kill. She still does not use this opportunity after she's done all of this to jump in and make her request known. She uses wisdom to say, I've done all of this. Will you allow me to do this again tomorrow? So of course they say yes, and she asks for Haman to be there at this feast the next day. So, because I'm not sure, I don't think Haman was at the first one. I think she called for Haman to be at the second feast, and so she got her good attire on, and she cooked for the brother, and she got the wine for the brother, and and then made her request known that she wanted to do that again. So patience, wisdom, patience, you know, these qualities that she used to be able to get into to get this request heard. And sometimes we have to be better with our approach and with our timing and with our with the wisdom that we use when we're trying to communicate something, when we're trying to make have moves made, when we're trying to do things. We have to be mindful of our approach, mindful of our timing, have enough patience to not just have to go in with our demands or our requests. So I love the way that she does this here. So then when she gets to the next um, by the time she gets to the next day for the feast, we talked about earlier Haman, and we see how Haman tries to slide in here, how the enemy through Haman is like, wait a minute, I'm about to lose out here. I'm about to lose out, and in between that night and that morning, he tries to get to the king to thwart things. But the Most High jumps in there, as we already talked about, and thwarts the plans of the enemy. The hands of the Most High, and puts favor for Mordecai in King Xerxes' heart, and Haman ends up being hanged and killed in the same way that he intended for Mordecai. So, hallelujah. So we see that throughout this story that the Most High's providence, His sovereignty is shown, is manifested in this story. How He prepared things. So after that was thwarted, and she finally is able to talk to the king to say that let her know what was happening, what happened with Mordecai and Haman, and how the people were going to be destroyed, and she pleads for the king to reverse what was put out, and Mordecai is lifted up. He's elevated in the king's kingdom, and is given for what he did in protecting the king, and when his doorkeepers were trying to kill him or whatever, he finally gets the manifestation of that favor, over him, and so I hope everyone has read the story before, because I'm not really going in a good order right now. I'm just trying to remember and give some reflections and thoughts from the story that really stick out to me, and so definitely go back and read the book and get the whole story. So this is where, on the time where they cast lots, that's what the name Purim comes from. It's casting lots. So Haman had casted lots to determine the day where the Israelites were going to be destroyed, where the Yehudim were going to be destroyed, and but it ended up being the day of their deliverance. It ended up being the day where they were freed. Okay, so the interesting thing, when Haman made this decree to destroy the Israelites, and the king put it in writing. I mean, they put it. It was like a government military order, right? And I'm going all into the story. I was supposed to just talk about those three characters, but here I go. But when they were, I really love this. I really love this story. But when Haman put out this decree, he had the king put out this decree, and the king gave him his signet ring, which is basically his signature, his authority, and Haman paid workers to be able to. He had money from the king's treasury to pay men to go out to destroy the Yehudim. This is basically like a government issued order. This is like a president signing an executive order, and sending it to all the states and initiating the military or the police or whatever the case may be to be able to officially destroy a people, and then sending out the word, putting it on the news. That's how it was when they sent out this order. Okay, so this was something that was, I mean, they had a date for it. It had been, I mean, it was good as done. But we see through the story, even in that, even when you see something that looks like it's definitely about to be for your demise and your destruction, to not fret. If the Most High says it's not so, it's not going to be so. So, and we see in this situation, as much as that was a good reason for them to fret, for them to think that their end was coming, the Most High was able to move. Now it took doing something on their behalf for the people. It took them weeping and praying and crying out to the Most High, and they had to have been in a position of being right before the Most High for Him to come in and deliver them. So there is a role that the people played, right? And then the ones who He chose to be intercessors and people to play a role, meaning Mordecai and Queen Esther, the people He put in position had to act. Everyone had to do what they were in position to do. So in the midst of that, the Most High was able to change what seemed like a certain decree. So we have to be mindful of that in this season that we're in, that we may see things that appear like it's going to be, that the Most High, I mean, that the people are going to overcome us in some kind of way. We see things where like, man, they're going to do this, and they're setting this up for this. They're trying to destroy us. We see all these plans, and we get so worried and so, you know, so we get so worried and so moved by it. But we have to be moved in the right way, not to fret, to think that, oh, our destruction is coming, but to really know that we have to humble ourselves to call on the Most High, and we have to ask ourselves, what position are we in for such a time as this? What position has the Most High put us in for such a time as this? The daily lives that we live, are we being obedient? Are we listening to the Spirit? Are we walking and acting in integrity towards each other so that we are rightfully positioned for whatever move the Most High gives us to make? So we have to take it seriously. Can you imagine if Mordecai had not acted in the way that he acted throughout his life? Could you imagine if Esther had not had the habit? So you can't just become patient at the last minute. You can't just become obedient at the last minute and listen and heed. You can't just come up with wisdom at the last minute. You know what I mean? You have to have a practice of this. You have to have a practice of patience and wisdom and grace. And you have to practice these things. Okay, so you have to have already be walking in a certain way. You can't at the last minute, right in the midst of the war, try to figure out how to fight, how to strategize. Okay, so lifestyle is so important. Our walk is so important. We don't even know what difference. We can't anticipate the difference that the minor things that we do. The child that we decide to take in and take care of. The person we decide to pour into. We can't anticipate, the patience that we take in dealing with somebody. We can't anticipate how the Most High is going to use that. We just have to be obedient and do what it is in that season, and we will see the manifestation, and we will see the deliverance of the Most High and His hand move in situations when we just are faithful and obedient to what the Most High has called us to be and to do in our everyday lives. So I love this story, and I love I don't want to make this too long, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this short. So I love how this story unfolds. This is where we get the celebration of Purim from. In the last chapters, it talks about that this celebration, it was something that Mordecai put into action for all of the Hebrews to celebrate this Purim to say on that day that Most High, that the enemy basically put for their destruction, the Most High turned it around and made it for their deliverance. Okay, and so he's had them to celebrate during that time period, and it was a celebration of it was a day of joy, of feasting, of it was a day of joy and feasting, a day of giving to each other, and of giving to the poor, giving portions to each other and giving to the poor. So it was a day of celebration, of joy, of feasting, giving to each other, giving to the poor. All right, that's how they celebrated this feast, and that's how we're to celebrate. There's no laws about this feast of Purim because it's not a feast of the Most High. It's a feast of the Hebrew people, so there's no right or wrong way. But this is how they instituted for it to be celebrated. A day of feasting, joy, sending portions to one another, and gifts to the poor. So whatever way the Most High creatively gives you and your family to be able to celebrate this time period is blessed in whichever way that you're able to do it. Going through the story, reading it, understanding it, getting the nuggets from it that are in there. It's full of it. It's really a lot of things in the story. So I'm going to end there, and I just wanted to share just a few thoughts and reflections from the book, and I pray that you are able to reflect on it, and as you read the story, ask the Most High, where has He put you for such a time as this? Give thanks to the Most High and the fact that He always has done this with our people, placing people in position. He did it with Daniel and the Hebrew boys. He did it with them, and flipping around while they're in the kingdom, in an enemy kingdom, but he moves them to a position, of favor, even though they were thrown into a position of disfavor. Right? He turns it around. He did it with Joseph. The way that he made that provision way ahead of time to save the people from famine, to save the Hebrew people from famine, and to later on, even though they ended up in an unfavorable position in bondage, the Most High used this situation to bring them, free them in a great deliverance. So the Most High is always moving so far in advance, so far before us, and moving and putting us in positions, and things that look unfavorable become favorable. So all praises to the Most High for how He works, His wisdom, His sovereignty, how His hand constantly is moving. And we honor our ancestors who were righteous and who, through their submission to Him, allowed deliverance to come to our people in different periods of time. And we pray to be able to continue to pass that, to walk in that spirit of humility, of trust for the Most High, and love for our people, and continue to see the hand of deliverance of the Most High. So with that, shalom, family.